Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Unmasking with Cindy and Sarah. And we have a very special guest. She's actually our first guest of 2025.
What?
And we have Karley Hill with us. And before I get into the background story of Karley and how we came to connect, I just wanted to remind everybody that our theme this month is creativity and play. And I was thinking about having Karley on specifically for this month because what she does, it's play, it's creativity, it's taking something that she has a passion for and connecting it with her purpose. And so I just thought it would be a really cool thing to have her on to share her story. And so thank you, Karley, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk today.
We're so excited to have you.
We
And
are.
so Karley reached out to me a couple of months ago. We have a mutual friend who has also been on the podcast before, Ann Nickel, who's a therapist in our area. And Karley is really good friends with her daughter. And so she reached out, and I was just really excited because I got to learn a little bit about her craft and her story. And so as we got to talking, I thought, do you want to be on the podcast? And she was so nice to accept the invitation. And so we just really appreciate your willingness to be here. And so I thought we would start, Karley, with just a little bit about your story. So if you could share with our listeners just your background, where did you grow up? What do you do now? And just kind of paint that picture for us, if you will.
Yeah, so I grew up in Frisco. I was born and raised there. I graduated from Heritage High School and I went to Oklahoma State for a year and a half. I studied graphic design while I was there, and then I ended up transferring to Texas Tech, and I went there for the next 3 years.
I'm a Red Raider
Sarah's
too.
a Raider.
I'm very excited. Love it.
I miss it.
Me too.
So I went there for 3 years, for the last 3 years. And then I worked for a corporate job for about 6 months as a designer, and quickly realized that was not really for me. And so in October of 2022, I decided to quit and do full-time freelancing. Didn't have much of a plan. I just knew that I wanted to be my own boss in some way. My parents were very supportive of that. I was still living at home, so that really helped. And I've since then done branding. I've done web design. I've done Etsy, which I still keep up with my Etsy. And now I have made my way into apparel, which is kind of how I got started back in high school and did that through college. So it's all kind of a full circle that now that I'm back doing apparel, and I use my own mental health story to create merch pieces that mean something to me, have a meaning behind them and a story, and spread awareness of mental health and try to end the stigma around it, because everybody struggles with it, and I just think it should be talked about more. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And we were wondering, since you just mentioned about your own mental health struggles and where you're at with your creativity through those mental health struggles, if you could share a little bit, because I know you also mentioned in high school kind of laid the foundation. So just a little bit about your story for our listeners.
Yeah, so I think it really started, it started a lot with death and grief. That's kind of, I think, where mental health came into play with me. I think I was about 11 years old when I experienced my first like death in my life. And it was sadly a little boy that was at our church that I used to babysit all the time. And so that really kind of messed with my head a little bit. I didn't know what to think of it. We didn't get into any therapy. Like I kind of just was having to deal with it on my own. So that was in middle school. And then a couple years later, I had a friend pass away from drugs our freshman year of high school. So then that kind of, made things a little bit worse. And by the time I was about 15, I always knew I had some ADHD. I didn't know it was ADHD, but I had some issues in school. I always felt like I was different. I had to work harder. Was always in extra tutoring. And so I always knew something was off, but I didn't know what ADHD was. And when I finally learned what that was, I kind of figured out that I was probably a little bit depressed too from all the things that I had gone through. And I didn't think my friends were going through that either. So I didn't know how to tell anybody. I had a friend from competitive cheer that I knew had experienced that before. She was very open with it about it with me. And so I remember reaching out to her and I was like, what do I do? Like, do you think that this is depression? Like, she was like, probably like after everything you've been through. And I was like, how do I tell my mom? Like, I don't know what to do. And so she encouraged me to like write a letter to my mom. She was like, you can get all your thoughts out on your paper. And I'm sure my mom, like, that just crushed her reading. But that was the way that I was like, I think I'm depressed. I think I have focus issues. Like, I'm struggling. And so she found me a doctor. We did all the testing. I had severe ADHD, still do. And then depression, they immediately put me on, I want to say it was Prozac, a sleeping pill. They put me on ADHD medicine. And it was a lot at once. Looking back, I'm like, wow, I was 15 and that I just all at once got all those medications. And I mean, it helped. It like medicine does help, but I stayed on it for far too long, I think. And I did not change my habits. I did not start to try to live a better lifestyle, did not learn about journaling or working out or eating to, benefit my body and help my brain. And I wasn't informed on that by my doctor. And so I don't think I continued the sleeping. It was kind of sleeping pills. It was kind of just like I wasn't sleeping at night and they were like, you need to sleep to get better. So, but I stayed on an antidepressant, different ones, and an ADHD medication, we would try different ones, from probably the time I was 15 until I was 21, 22. So that brought me all the way through my junior year of college. And I mean, things were great. I did not experience anxiety or depression during that time. Looking back, I'm glad that I got to have my college experience without having mental health right there, right on my shoulder the whole time. But now I think when it came to a halt in 2020, I kind of was like, okay, maybe the medication wasn't all that great. And so when everything collapsed it was September 2020. And I don't know, this part might be controversial, but it's a part of the story. I got COVID. And something in me before COVID, like August, I did recruitment. I threw a friend's birthday party, and that is where we got sick, my roommate and I. Had a week of COVID, came back, and that's the night and day change in my mental health.
Wow.
Don't know if it messed with the chemicals in my brain. I don't know. I do know that was the turning point for me for whatever reason. And I was like, oh, my meds aren't working. Like maybe something happened. Like I need to switch meds. So of course my doctor and I get on the phone. I'm in college. We switch meds. Nothing's working. I just instantly had woken up after this and was so anxious. I could not, like everything stressed me out. And I was on the executive council for my sorority. I was running the social media. I had a part-time job at a t-shirt shop. And I was in design school. So I was designing a lot. And I think burnout contributed to that.
Yeah.
And so we tried to switch medications. Nothing really was working. I went that whole fall 2020 semester kind of just getting worse day by day. I was staying up late doing homework. It was a hard semester as is. And then I was like, oh, when I get home from break for winter, everything will go back to normal. Like I'll be fine. I'm just stressed. And it didn't. It just continued to get worse. It was just, I didn't have to worry about everything, but my mental health was still bad. And so I go back to school spring 2021. And that was probably like the worst semester. I was in tears every day. I was panic attacks. I was having to call out of work. I had to go to class, but work was just not happening. I ended up like trying to do all my work from home. And it was just, I was in such a dark, dark hole that I was like, I can't get out of this. Like what? I didn't know what was happening. But I knew I had to keep going. Like I couldn't just stop my life for this. I wasn't working out. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't eating right. I was barely eating. I lost probably like 15 pounds. I was so tiny. My hair was falling out. I did not know what was happening. And my doctor also didn't know. They just were like, try this, like just throwing darts at this point. Try this, try this, and nothing. I mean, it was making it worse at that point. And so I got home for the summer. And I was like, okay, surely I have 3 months off. Like, I'll be good. I just have to worry about like social media at my work or for my sorority. And that was like the lowest point. I mean, we went back to the doctor like in person and I was like, we got to fix this. And he ended up prescribing me an antipsychotic. I did not need an antipsychotic, but I didn't know that. I was like, okay, you're the doctor, you know what you're talking about. And I have a family member who has also dealt with mental health issues, and this same medication made her have suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And it brought me to that same point. And my mom almost checked me in. We went to an outpatient facility or an inpatient. And we got there and I was like, no, this is not what I need. Like in the back of my mind, I was like, this is not right. This is not what I need. And this medication is not right. So I got off of that. The thoughts went away, but the mental health problems didn't. And I remember my sister was even having a baby that summer. And I was just like, okay, like it was her second baby. I love both of them, but I was obsessed with being an aunt. Thought I would be so excited to be an aunt again. And I was just indifferent. Like I was emotionless. And I remember telling my parents that, and I think that's when they were like, okay, what is happening? Like, this is not you. But in my mind, I was like, I have to finish school. Like I have 1 year left. I have to go back. And so through all the tears, I went back in August of 2021. I did recruitment work week, and then a full week of that, and then a full week of recruitment. And I was a senior, so I had to lead it. I was also on the executive council, so I was in charge of a lot. I was crying day and night, having mental breakdowns. Like I don't think I've ever faked anything so much. And you have to fake it even in a sorority and recruitment as is. And so so I was like a double faking it. And it just those were like the hardest 2 weeks of my life. And I mean, I talk to people now that were with me that didn't know what was happening. And they're like, I never would have known, like you. And so I had to put on just a different mask. And then what was it? 2 days in to my senior year, I went to the first day of classes and the second day. And after that, I had called my mom. I was by myself. My roommate, she was at nursing school. It was a different roommate. And so she didn't start till a little bit later. So I was by myself this whole time, which also did not help. And I called my mom, or she called me, and I was just like hyperventilating, crying. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, and she called my boyfriend, and who he, bless his soul, had been dealing with this since we started dating in 2020. So he did not know any other version of me, but we're still together 4 years later. So he stuck it out, but she called him and was like, what do you think we should do? Should we pull her out of school? Like, do you think that this is going to be the best thing for her? And everybody agreed that it was. And so my parents called me back and they're like, all right, pack up your stuff. Like, we're coming to Lubbock tomorrow and we're moving you home. And of course I lost it again. I'm like, what? Like, my college life is over. Like I tried to go backwards. I'm like, no, it's fine. It's fine. And they're like, no, like we can't leave you out there like this and see you like this every single day. You're not okay. And so I had to unenroll from school, quit Zeta, quit my job, all in a matter of like 24 hours. And it was just such a shock. I had no idea what was happening. By the time I got home, it did feel like there was a weight lifted off my shoulders. I was like, okay, I can focus, I can breathe, I can focus on getting better. And so we ended up getting with therapist and a holistic doctor that kind of work hand in hand. They refer to each other. And so that holistic doctor, that woman saved my life. We went to her and she immediately, within 5 minutes, she was like, do you have any food allergies or any like history of allergies in your family? And I was like, well, my dad and my grandma have celiac. I have the gene. I was tested for the gene in high school, which if you get test positive for the gene, it's about a 75% chance it's going to activate in your system at some point. So my dad, it didn't activate in him till he was in his 40s. And so she was like, you need to go on a gluten-free diet. And for her, her and her daughter both experienced like crippling anxiety. They both went gluten-free and that fixed it for them. And they have not had any since. And so I was so reluctant. I knew this day was coming in my future at some point because it's a history in my family. And I just did not think it was going to be in my 20s. So it was a lot at first. I think I went another couple weeks with still eating gluten. I was like, I need to eat every single meal that I'm never going to have again. And then it was my birthday. How old did I turn? 23. My 23rd birthday, right after in October. That was when I decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to start today. And since then I've been gluten-free. She ended up putting me on a stronger antidepressant just to kind of pull me out, like really help pull me out of the hole. I got off the ADHD medication because I didn't really need it to focus at this time. And she does not believe in ADHD medication. So she was like, cut that out. And so I remember maybe like early December, not even 2 months. I remember like driving in my car. I was babysitting. That was how I was just making money while I was living at home trying to heal. And I remember driving home, listening to music. And for the first time, I was like, I kind of feel normal again. Like, I feel like something has changed. Like, I was singing along to the music. I was enjoying like just the little things you know, you like drive alone at night, listening to your favorite music. Like, I hadn't felt that kind of joy in a long time. And I just remember like exactly where I was in McKinney. And I was like, I feel normal. Like, something is changing. And so I've been gluten-free ever since. I think in 2022, maybe halfway through, I got off all antidepressants. I ended up staying on that strong one for a little bit just to make sure that it wasn't just the gluten-free diet that was like, you know, changing everything. And yeah, I ended up getting off that. So I haven't been on an antidepressant in 2 years now. I did get retested at an ADHD center for ADHD when I was working my corporate job because I was like struggling without it. And I was like, maybe I still have it. Like, you know, I do. I tested like 99% out of 100% of positive having ADHD. So now I am on, that's the only medication I take. Well, is a low dose of ADHD medication. And it helps. I mean, it's the perfect amount. And now I've just been on a healing journey ever since to not let myself get back there. But I think a lot contributed to that breakdown and that mental health, whether it was burnout, getting sick, not taking care of myself. I've learned since that I have to work out to feel good. I have to watch what I put in my body. Because after I realized that gluten could contribute to anxiety, I was like, okay, well, what other food can help my body? What other food can help my brain? Because the gut's right connected to your head, your brain. And so I've learned a lot about eating right and working out and journaling and taking care of myself and taking time to be creative outside of my job. So yeah. That's the long version.
No, thanks for sharing that. You know, when it comes to ADHD, I know you mentioned you felt like you were wearing a mask and you didn't even get that diagnosis till later. And I think they're finding more and more that women who have ADHD, they just present so different. And so like they usually look at it like women have a personality disorder or they have anxiety or depression and all these things, when if we just knew from childhood that our brain just functioned a little bit different, you know, maybe we wouldn't have those comorbid diagnoses with it. So I think one of the things that I took from your story is just how amazing it was that you kept reaching out to your support system and you kept saying like, something doesn't feel right. Like you were really listening to yourself. I know you said you froze, you know, there were times where you just felt like you couldn't do anything, but you still managed, Karley, to like move forward and do all of the things. And you were burnt out, but you still, you know, you were masking your way through it. And then that's exhausting in itself. And so I commend you for anyone who's listening to listen to Karley's story, because it's always important to reach out to people and to advocate for yourself and to have people who will advocate for you when you can't. Like finding that other doctor who was so beneficial in helping you heal, and then just learning about your brain and that you're normal. Your brain is normal just as it is. It's just how your brain functions and things are a little bit harder. Like what you're doing now, being creative, is so amazing for ADHD minds. I have ADHD too, and you crave that creativity. That's kind of, you know, what kind of calms you down and heals you from like the mundane things. It's a lot easier to hyper focus on that than it is to like, oh, I have to put my laundry away, which is like so difficult for someone with ADHD. Like, look, I will die on this hill, but it is so difficult to do those little tiny things. So you're functioning all day, getting the important things done, but you're not really getting, you know, that intrinsic motivation that fuels you doing those things. And so the creativity outlet, I think, is just so amazing. And I just commend you for sharing and for continuing to advocate for yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm just thinking about like what a fragile time of life it is when you are in high school and then you're making these decisions to, you know, where do I want to go to school and what do I want to study? And as if that's not overwhelming enough, let's, stack on some anxiety and maybe even some depression. And just the adjustment alone for that is overwhelming. And so I'm wondering, if you could share, because you're definitely, I think you're one of the first ones that we've had on who's in this age range where a lot of kind of people in their younger 20s are starting to experience some of these things, and they're having these questions, but maybe they're not comfortable talking about it outwardly because all we see is what's on social media and people living their best lives, their best college lives. And if they're struggling specifically in those college years, then sometimes I think the consensus is like, oh, I must be doing this wrong. I must not be college material, or I must not be, right for this experience. And so that's a really long way for me to ask the question of, can you talk about some of the misconceptions about mental health struggles, like especially in these like young adult years when you're just starting out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is that everybody thinks that they're the only person experiencing that. Like you said, especially on social media. I mean, I've had to learn social media is just a highlight reel. Nobody's sharing, the times they're crying themselves to sleep. Like it's not, that's what it is. It's to share the happy times in your life. And I think especially just this day and age, growing up with social media so prevalent. I mean, I was in middle school. I was in 6th grade when Instagram came out. So I was like the very beginning of this. And even then, nobody's posting what they're going through, like outside of school, outside of, the happy things. And so I think having to learn that like you're not alone. And in high school, that was especially hard because even just seeing my friends and being with them day to day, I'm like, well, they never mention that they're sad or that they're anxious or that, they're struggling. Like we're all having a good time every time we hang out. So like, there's no way that they're experiencing this too. Like it's just me. I'm hiding all of this. And so I definitely struggled with that in high school because I just never saw it from anybody else except that one friend that I had that was just very vocal about it. But even then I was like, well, it just must be me and her. Like everybody else is fine, I guess. And so then getting into college, kind of the same thing. And especially whenever I started to struggle towards the end of college, I was so good at hiding it. Nobody in my sorority knew. Nobody around me knew. My roommate, I think, was probably the only friend that knew what was happening because she was seeing it day to day. And, she could only do so much too. And then my parents and stuff. But whenever I started to share my story on Instagram, when I shared it for the very first time, the year after, like 1 year exactly to the date of when I left Texas Tech, I kind of not celebrate that anniversary, but that's kind of like an anniversary every year. And the very first time I posted about it, I made this whole long post and mentioned, Zeta and the girls that were looking up to me like during those 2 weeks of recruitment, and the amount of them that DM'd me and other people outside of that DM'd me and told me that they were going through something awful or something similar at the same time, or that they never would have known that I was struggling, but that they were struggling as well. And just the amount of people that reached out and was like, I was struggling at this exact same time as you. Like I had no idea we were both going through this same thing. Yeah. It really opened my eyes. And I think that was the first time that kind of I got the idea of like, maybe I'm supposed to share my story. Like I hate hearing that all these people also experience this, but it also made me feel good that they felt less alone in their struggles. And they were like, okay, like even this girl who was in a sorority and looked like she was living her best life, and she was struggling too. And I had no idea, like, it's okay that I was struggling during that time. And so that was kind of the first time that I realized like, maybe I should share my story. I mean, that was in 2022. So it really took me a couple years to kind of piece the things together of how I could share my story and, do something with my creativity. But I think that it's, the main misconception is that nobody else is dealing with this, when in reality it's like 1 in 4 people at this point that are struggling. Like it's everywhere, and people are just nobody wants to talk about it. It's it's uncomfortable, it's not fun to talk about, but it's real. And I'm sure if people start to share, then they're going to have at least one friend that's like, hey, I'm going through that too, or I've been through that, or I know what you're going through, kind of thing.
Yeah. So. It really removes the shame stigma when people open up about things. It's typically always met with,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like somebody's talking about it, somebody's naming it. So it really kind of helps, I think, remove that pressure. People can see themselves in other people's stories, which is, I think, is what is so powerful about things like, being honest on Instagram
Yeah.
or podcasting or
Yeah.
Which is,
absolutely.
if you really think about social media, it's just a mask for everything, really. It's just a very pretty mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I mean, it's great for people to put wonderful things, but connection happens, when people really get to know who you are from the inside. And so I'm glad that you found your support system. And it sounds like you have a great group of people and your story is going to help a lot of people. So with that said, how have you, or like, what are some ways that creativity has like fostered healing for you, and how do you express creativity like on a regular basis?
I think I've had to learn that like I can do creative things that are not just on the computer. The burnout kind of made me realize that like maybe I need to step out of graphic design if this is something I want a career out of. Like that's where I need to put my creativity. And like if you'll see behind me, I do still design, but most of the time it just goes up on my wall. It's not something I pressure myself to post because that would add a lot of pressure of like when I would sit down and create. So when I create now on the computer, it's still kind of rare, but it just goes right up. But last year I decided that I needed to try other things. So within the last year, I think, and this is also an ADHD hyperfixation thing that I've picked up on like 8 different creative hobbies that are just in my closet that I might not touch again. But I've done air dry clay. I did crocheting, watercolors. I started to do those they sell them at Hobby Lobby. You can it's like a kit of like a tiny house and you can make tiny couches and
Those
I
are
made
fun.
about 3 of those that are just on display now. Painting, I recently got the alcohol markers and coloring books. Like I have tried everything. The coloring books are my new thing that I do a couple nights a week now. But it really just helps me get out of the computer side, whether I'm, whether you're a designer or not, like when you're working all day on the computer, it's something fun to look forward to at the end of the day. I just put a TV show on, I get to color, or I get to, make air dry clay and I make little magnets for our fridge. Like it's just something to do with your hands that just gets you out of it. Like that's the only thing you're focusing on. You're not thinking about, the stress at work or how you're struggling or if you're sad that day. Like it's just something fun to do. You kind of feel like a little kid again. It almost feels like it's healing an inner child inside. So I think just finding that, which one of the many hobbies that you can pick up on kind of works for you is a great way to like help healing and just kind of take your mind off of healing itself. Like I know it can be a lot like of stress to try and heal yourself and journal every day and read self-help books and do the workouts, do the eating right. And so it's just kind of something that's fun, but also I feel like it does heal you slowly because you're just taking your mind off of all the stressful things in your life for a little bit.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. It makes me think of something that I was listening to recently, and Sarah, I might have shared this with you, but it was actually Glennon Doyle's podcast, and she was talking about how, we tend to get really in our left brains and like the logical, linear part where, that's where we'll find ourselves looping or ruminating about something. It's like we're trying to think our way out of our own challenges as if thinking about it over and over is going to somehow fix it or move us forward, when in reality the question should be, in times like those, what can I create? And it helps us shift out of that left brain and back into the right brain, which is where we hold emotion and our creative side, I guess. So that's what it makes me think of, just hearing you talk about like things other than just graphic design, because I'm sure as a creative person, you can get almost kind of pigeonholed into your craft. And even that starts to feel less creative. So can you talk a little bit about what that's been like for you? Like when you find yourself in a rut or a creative rut?
Yeah. So if I find myself kind of in a rut, I used to, when I was designing a lot more Etsy stuff and I would find myself, not being able to produce things, I would literally just take one of my bigger sketchbooks and get the markers, I would get the paint, the watercolors, and I would just start drawing the first thing that came to mind, like an apple, a tree. Like I would just fill a page full of the most random things. And I mean, they're nothing that I would hang up on my walls, but they really, like, I think I saw this on TikTok. I saw a video of somebody that was like, if you're creative and you're stuck, like just start doing what comes to your mind. And then I would take a break from design. Like I would just take a break. I'd scroll Pinterest for a few days. Like I would just let my mind kind of relax, because it's almost like starts working in overdrive, and it just, then I get mentally, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm stressed out. Like I'm not making anything. I'm not making anything I like or want to sell. And it just like is this, overdrive of overthinking of everything. And I just kind of had to like pause and remind myself to like do something else outside of design, have fun with it, something that you're not going to put anywhere, like to where there's no pressure. I think sometimes the pressure and the perfectionism gets ahead of the creativity. And I kind of have to just remind myself, like, take a few days, like you can't be creative every day. I've had to learn, like it's not healthy. I did it and it didn't work out well. I was doing it in 3 completely different aspects. And I just didn't realize that that's not, like, they don't teach you that in design school, that, you have to take breaks. You have to let your brain rest a little bit and just do something fun that you're not about to try to sell or use for a product or, give to somebody. Like, got to do something fun for your brain a little bit. So
oh, that's so important what you just said, though, too, about like they don't teach us these things. And if you're in a creative profession, I feel like they should be teaching those things, right? Because like in grad school for counseling, they teach us about like you've got to have your own therapist, you've got to be doing your own work, but it shouldn't be any different for graphic design or something like that.
It was never mentioned to me, or I probably would have listened a little bit better. Maybe taking the advice.
Yeah. Well, no. And even if you are in a creative profession, it's still your profession. So it's still work.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference, is like work versus play. Yes, you're being creative, but there's expectations put on it. And so it's taking the expectations out.
Yeah.
And that's when the play happens. And that's when, our brain, the new neural pathways can start opening up and we don't have that rigidity anymore. And so I think that that's good self-awareness to have too, is if you're feeling stuck, you're feeling like this is overwhelming, then it's not play anymore.
Yeah.
It's not creativity. It's more of like a job. And and so that's when you need to maybe, like you said, take a step back, scroll Pinterest, like, stop what you're doing and then find a different outlet to do that. And so, but I mean, I think even with creativity, when you're in it 24/7, it's going to become, overwhelming, just like any profession would. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? If you are talking to someone and they say, I am not a creative person, I do not have a creative bone in my body, but I know that on some level, everybody tells me that I need to do this and I need to engage in play and creativity. But like, I don't even know where to start because I'm used to things that are performative and checking a box and getting feedback, asking for a friend. What would you tell them? Where would you encourage them to start?
I think really I started whenever I got out of the graphic design bubble. I started with watercolors, just because you can't really mess it up. You can paint lines, you can paint circles. Like, it's not where you have to sit down and sculpt something out and, So I always say, like, just get like a little watercolor set. And I think that just letting yourself, like, as a kid, I used to I have so many memories going over to my cousin's house. They had boxes of markers, different markers, crayons, and we would just put on kid movies and sit and color all day long, color whatever we wanted. And which is funny now because I'm a graphic designer. One of my other cousins is like an artist. Like, she's actually really good at drawing, and her dad, my uncle, is also very good at drawing. So it there's a little bit of an artist bone in everybody's body. But I think that just kind of remembering that, like, we all used to color as kids. We all used to love to paint as kids. And like, even if you're not painting, you don't have to have a picture in mind. And if you want a picture in mind, I go to Pinterest and just look up like watercolor pictures and I'll copy it. I mean, it's not like you're going to sell it. You're just doing it for fun. So you can copy somebody else's. But I always say watercolors just because you don't have to like necessarily draw out with a pencil and make things look realistic. You can kind of just make whatever you want to make with it.
Okay. And what do you notice? What would you say some of the like direct benefits are? Like after you engage in something like this and maybe you're on a creative break from graphic design, is there something that really sticks out to you where you're like, oh, that's what I needed?
Yeah, I think I just feel it's less, I don't feel the pressure anymore. Like I'm kind of, it reminds my brain that like, it's just art. Like, it's not, you're not doing brain surgery. You're not saving the world. Like,
Right.
it's just, you're making art. Like, it's not, it reminds me that it's all not that serious. Like,
Yes.
I just needed that
Yeah.
reminder, and I do something that's like kid-like, like coloring or building clay, and I'm like, it's really none of it's that serious. Like, and by the time I get back to the computer, I'm like, yeah, I can do this.
It's funny that you say it like that, because I was just thinking about something that my kids always say to me, like whenever I'm talking therapy talk, which is pretty much 99.9% of my day. And they'll say, it's not that deep, Mom. It's not that deep. And I'm like,
It's not that deep.
yeah, you know what? It's not that deep. Life isn't that deep sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, let's just like take our foot off the gas of intensity
Yeah.
and just color.
Yeah.
And put on a TV show.
Right.
Yeah. Color. But listen, and it's so subjective being creative and playing. Like there's no right or wrong way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we lose the mark is as kids, we just have these imaginations and we just, play and make up stories. But then as we go along, we're told, you need to do it this way in school. And I know we talked about it the other day too, and you need to do it this way and there's a right way. So then we start getting more rigid and we're like, oh, we get away from that creativity, that imaginative play that we used to have. And so I think when Cindy had mentioned, for someone who struggles to play, I mean, there's art, there's putting Legos together. You can just make what you want with the Legos. If you're a person who needs a plan, they have plans and you can build them that way. Play-Doh, there's gardening. I mean, there's just walking outside and, maybe just running and screaming on a hill because you need to do that. I don't know. Reenact the sound of music. I don't know. Do what you need to do. But I think there's so many ways and there's not a wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking I'm not doing this right, then you're definitely not in the right headspace. And you need to change that because play should just feel fun. Like you were saying, like no expectations, no limits on it. I mean, even just going to like a theme park. I think to like Disney adults, like I'm a Disney person. I love Disney. It's fun. My childhood was fun. I loved going there. I love wearing the ears. Everybody's happy. I've never seen someone, I mean, granted the lines can be long, but I've never seen somebody be like, oh my gosh, I'm at Disney. Like this is miserable. Like I've never seen it. So
Hard to be
I
sad
think
there.
there's just so many different, like you can go places, go to a museum if you want to do that. There's so many different creative outlets. And I just think it's amazing to hear your story, Karley, and to share how that really fueled your healing. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate you sharing that.
I think too, just to add on to what you were saying earlier about like the graphic design piece of it, one of my biggest takeaways from our conversation so far is that, even people in creative professions struggle with the intensity of the creative part of the profession. And so it's just as important as if you worked as a data clerk or whatever, it's just as important to pause, take a step back and do something that's engaging your senses, that's not tied to your worth, to your talent, expectations that other people have for you. And so I guess that kind of leads itself to its next question of, when you look back to those years where you were starting out in college and you were starting to notice like something's not right here, and you pressed on, and then you eventually listened to your body and all of that. What is something that in hindsight, like you wish you would have known when you first started out on this journey of healing yourself?
I think I would have wished that I knew that you can do things to also help yourself while taking medication. Like medication's just a Band-Aid. It's not going to fix all. You have to do the work as well, and you have to take care of yourself. And I mean, my roommate, she could tell you, she would go to the gym every day. She would go on a walk with the dogs. She'd come by. You want to go? No? Go on. I'm good. I don't want to go. Like she did get me to eat semi-healthy, but it wasn't very much. Like I wish I would have been introduced to the fact that like you do have to take care of your body. Your gut is directly related to your brain, and you can
Yes.
help yourself without medication. And I mean, I'm not saying medication is all bad. Like I know that people need it. I needed it at one point, but it's not, I don't think it's a long-term thing. I wish I would have, gotten the help I needed, felt better, and then learned the healthy habits to take care of myself.
Yeah.
I also wish I would have known that like healing is not linear. It's not just like an upward path. Like there's ups and downs. And I've even learned that just since I've been home from college that, some months are not going to be good months and you're going to slip back into old habits. And I also wish I would have learned or known and told myself that like you can't just stop the healthy habits once you start doing them. You have to continue to do them. It's not just you do them for 6 months and then it's gonna be good forever, because then you slip back and I'm like, well, wait, what happened? Why do I feel, why don't I feel good anymore? But I'm not doing all the things that I used to do.
Yeah.
So I've definitely, even just within the last year or so, I've had to learn like, oh, okay, this is a continuous thing that I have to keep doing to help myself every single day.
Kind of like laundry that way.
Yeah.
It's like there's always going to be more laundry. You're never going to get it folded and put away and you're done for the rest of your life. And I think that's what can be so frustrating about this, is because we feel like, oh, look, I'm doing all the things. I'm doing it right. And so I can just coast.
Yeah.
And then eventually you run out of clean clothes, right? Yeah, and then you got to do the laundry again.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I love what you said too about medicine is a Band-Aid. It's not going to solve everything. But I also think too, from what you were saying too, is it's also helpful to get you motivated to change. So then once maybe you have those healthy habits, then you can take a step back like you did, like you took a step back from it. And that can be empowering for people too who are struggling, is like, there's no shame in the medication game, but it's also important to look at like the whole person. And I think that your generation is really doing a good job of promoting that on social media, of talking about like mental health and like whole body health, which is something that I think we've missed the mark on. But I just wanted to throw that out there too, that I loved what you said about it being, a Band-Aid, because so many people have so many misconceptions. They get very nervous. And when it does come to medication, listen to it. If you take it and you are not feeling better, change it, call your doctor, those things, like, what you were doing, working with someone. But it can definitely be something that can help get you motivated to then look at your whole body and figure out ways that you can help it to heal. So ultimately the goal is you have these healthier habits, you know how to function, you know how to, what's going on with you. And then you can, take a step back from those things too. Cause I think there's just so many people are nervous when it comes to
kind
medicine.
Of like when you're in that deep, dark hole, if somebody's like, okay, start going on walks, start going to the gym, let's eat healthy, let's start journaling. I don't want to do that.
No,
like,
that sounds terrible.
Good. And so it gets you, it can pull you, like I say, from the dark hole to the surface. And you're like, okay, I can breathe. I'm above water. Now I can see what things that I should start doing, what things I can start implementing. And then as you start to go above the water more, you're like, okay, maybe I don't need the medication anymore.
Yeah.
It just pulls you out to where you can see and breathe. And you're like, I can see what things I can start to do to help myself.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I'm wondering, Karley, if you don't mind, can you speak a little bit about your specific line of products that you've created for mental health awareness, and when did that start? Just kind of give us a little bit of detail behind that.
Yeah. So in my healing journey, I think we really started once I was above the water in 2022. I realized like what the brain can do and how you can help the brain, and mostly brain health. And I was listening to so many podcasts, specifically Dr. Daniel Amen. I became obsessed.
I love him. I love him.
And my mom at one point tried to reach out to his clinic, but it's thousands of dollars to get your brain scanned. And
I know, I want one of those so bad. They're so cool.
Yeah.
And so she was like, let's like, and I understood. I was like, I don't want you to pay that either. Like, and so I was like, well, let me just listen to every single podcast episode he's ever been featured on, because then I'm getting a lot of information for free. So that's what I did. And I learned so much from him. And one of the things that I took away the most was they always ask him, like, how do you help your own brain? How do you, factor everything that you teach into your own life. And he was like, the one thing that I do every day, well, I'm sure he does multiple things, but he was like, the one thing that he does is every night before he goes to bed, he shares or thinks to himself, like, what went well today, and kind of just picks out, even if it's just one thing, like, even when you're in, like, I'm sure back in the day in my, when I was in the hole, I could probably still find one good thing that happened that day. Like, it's just hard to see when you're really down in the dumps. And he even shares, like, on the worst day of his life, when his father passed away, like, he had a good interaction with the police officer that was there. And it trains your brain to, over time, just still find the positives, even when you're not fully positive in your own brain. And so that stuck with me. I still have a reminder on my phone every night at 9 p.m. when I know that I'll be like in bed that says what went well today. And I, with ADHD, I forget just about everything. So I have to have these little reminders come up, and I'm like, oh yeah, even it's been in my reminder for over 2 years now. And I'm still like, oh yeah, I almost forgot about that. And so I still do that. And whenever I was trying to figure out what the next thing I was going to do with my freelancing business was, I was kind of at a standpoint or stopping point last summer. And it was after I had a slight little mental breakdown to my boyfriend of like, what am I doing? Should I just go back and get a job? Like, this is not working. It was almost like I woke up the next day, and it was right after the 3 years anniversary of me moving home, which is in August. It was like I woke up the next day and I knew exactly what to do. Like, I had known that it made me feel good inside to share my story and see how it helps people not feel so alone. I just didn't know. I was like, am I supposed to just start sharing this? Like, what do I do with this? And I knew I've always wanted to do my own apparel. I designed apparel. That was part of my freelancing, was designing apparel for other companies. And I loved it, but I didn't love that like celebrities would wear it and they were wearing that brand. Like, that's what they thought. They weren't wearing Karley Hill design. They didn't know I made it. Yeah. And I didn't love that. I'm like, well, I spent hours and hours on that and I don't even get the credit. So I always knew that I wanted to do something with apparel. And it was like, I just woke up one day and was like, I need to do things that have helped me in my healing journey on apparel and sell them. And so I kind of made a list of quotes. I've always been a very big quote person. I would hang up quotes in my, in my bedroom in high school, and Pinterest. I have like thousands of pins saved that are just quotes. It's always helped me. And I just started to kind of make a list of things that have really helped me the last few years. That was one of them. Obviously, I didn't want to do what went well today. I didn't want to get involved with like any trademarks or anything if if that was his thing. So I kind of twisted it to say, find the good in every day. And I was like, okay, that could be cute. I made a design and I was like, let's do that. And so luckily I work part-time at a screen printing shop just like down the road. And my boss gave me all the contacts that I needed to do embroidery. He's helping me with this next collection that's going to be screen printing. And so it's kind of like a God thing. Everything kind of fell into place, and I realized realized what I could do, and I had the help, and that's what I've been doing since. And I'm about to have a second collection come out. It'll be Everything Happens for a Reason, which is actually what I got tattooed on the 2-year anniversary, when I still didn't know why this happened to me, but I just am firm believer in that. Like, you'll see something, even if it's just something so small, like you'll see something good come from all the bad. Yeah. And so I got that on my arm, and then almost a year to the date later, realized like, maybe this is the reason, maybe this is what I should be doing. And so I have a list of different collections that I want to come out with, each one having like a story. So obviously Everything Happens for a Reason is going to be back to my story and how now this is the reason. But yeah, so I'm really excited.
Oh, I love that.
I love it too.
Love that. And I think so much about the quotes specifically, like the find the good in every day and everything happens for a reason. I think sometimes when people hear that, they get that reaction of like, oh, so what I'm going through isn't like relevant. And I always tell clients, like, no. This isn't toxic positivity. This isn't me trying to bright side a situation. Like, I very much understand that it takes time to really make those connections. And when you're in it, that's probably not the time to make the connection.
Somebody could have told me that and I would have laughed in their face and been like, okay, you have no idea what I'm going through.
Isn't that sweet?
That's not going to help me.
Right. But just this idea that like, yes, you can be in that dark hole and it can feel awful and horrible and it is a bad situation. And if you can just hold on, if you can just look for like that one thing, like you said, like it could be something so simple and, call it a gratitude practice, call it, whatever, but our brains are wired to find what's not working. It's a negativity bias, right? And so if I can just be outward with it, go help somebody else, go connect with somebody while I'm in my own hole, it can kind of widen my own window a little bit, I guess is what I'm taking away from that.
Yeah. And I also feel like from what you were saying too, both of you, is that maybe the one thing that happened in your day, if you're very depressed, is you're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're still here. You made it through today. So what does that tell you? You made it through a hard day.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's a new day. And just taking it a day at a time. I mean, I think sometimes that's all anyone can do, not putting the expectation, of the future. Because we, so many people, especially with anxiety, we're always like thinking in the future, what's this going to be like? What's that going to be like? But one good thing in the day, you're here.
Yes.
That's a good thing. You're here. You made it through another rough day.
The next right step, just the next right step. Sometimes if I just get too far ahead of myself, that's what I have to remember, right? Like back up. Back up. We're not there yet. And so I love this. Again, I think this is such a beautiful story of taking your pain and turning it into your purpose. And I'm curious, Karley, where can people find out more if they want to order your products or just learn a little bit more about you? Where should they look?
Yeah. So to order some individual products, it'll be karleyhilldesign.com on my website. It also has the written out version of my story on there. And then my Instagram is also Karley Hill Design, as well as my TikTok. Those both have video versions of my story, and kind of each will have all of the collections eventually. But right now it just has the Find the Good collection and the, me explaining that again. And then wholesale stuff can just be reached out straight to me. I have my contact on my website and in my Instagram, because my goal is to eventually, I think that this could help a lot of people that are just entering therapy, even though, like I said, I probably would have laughed if somebody would have given me that. But like, even still seeing that every day, like, okay, maybe I should try to find, once it's explained to me, like, okay, maybe I should find one good thing, even if it's just that I got out of bed this morning and I made it through the day. Like, I think slowly over time, like, even if that's your thing every single day, like maybe the next week or the next month, you're like, oh, well, this one good thing did happen. And it's not just that I made it through the day. It's that something positive happened. So I think that getting these in some therapy offices is my main goal, because I think that, it'll help people even when they don't want to be necessarily helped yet.
Right.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I think it'd be cool, because college is so hard, is to get it into the colleges, maybe something where everyone coming into the dorm, they have something they can put somewhere and they look at it. That would be that would be amazing, because I think college can feel very lonely, even though you're surrounded by a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going through so many different changes, but I love your story. I love everything you represent. Thank you for being so vulnerable with us and sharing with us. And we will definitely link all of your information, so that everyone can find you, on our podcast site, our website, and then on our social media too. So
thank you so much.
Thank you
Karley.
for coming, Karley.
We appreciate it. We hope to have you back with more collections, and
more coming this
love to have you.
For sure.
Yay!
Love
Exciting. Oh, well, thanks again, Karley, for just being vulnerable and being a part of our series on creativity and play.
Of course, I'm so happy I could be. Thank you for having me.
Of course. We'll see you guys next week.
See ya. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If this podcast resonated with you, it would mean so much to us if you'd be willing to take a few minutes of your time and do a couple of things. First, can you please follow or subscribe to the Unmasking podcast? This is helpful for you because you'll never miss an episode. So to do this, go to the Unmasking podcast show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click follow. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give us a 5-star rating and share an episode that you loved with a friend, we would be so grateful. The Unmasking podcast is created and hosted by Cindy Payne and Sarah Vaught. And you can also find more information by logging on to our website, theunmaskingpodcast.com. There you will see opportunities to subscribe as well as apply to be a guest on our show. As always, we're so grateful for you, and we hope you join us next week for a new episode. Thank you.